Welcome back, book lovers. Here we are, Phil Svitek and Marisa Serafini and I. We are here for our October book choice. It is Stranger with My Face by Lois Duncan. This was my choice. Whew, man, what a ride. We're going to get all into it. Spoiler heavy. If you haven't read the book or seen any movie adaptations, pause us, go read the book, and then come back to us because we're going to talk all about it. Yeah, lots to discuss. Phil, what were your quick thoughts?
Well, certainly interesting selection for you,
I know.
given the genre, but it is by the same author. I didn't realize that I Know What You Did Last Summer was actually a book, so same author. And so I kind of found that out before reading the book. So I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be a horror thing. It's more of a thriller than a horror in that
Mhm.
sense. It's not quite. I mean, I've only seen I Know What You Did Last Summer. I've not read the book. This feels kind of like much more young adult horror than true, like let's say Stephen King horror or something like that. But it has its moments, and I think overall I enjoyed it. I think some things could have. I mean, it's a relatively short book, but I think some things could have been quickly hastened, or more so. I just had a bit of an issue with the thought process of the main character, Laurie. She at times, I don't know, just kind of it's like realize this girl, and sometimes like I'd rather have spent it got so interesting towards the end and it kind of yada yadas it versus just exploring it because that to me is the bulk of what's fascinating. Anyway, but
Interesting.
overall enjoyable, but could have been improved here and there.
I see. Yeah, and so this book was written or published in 1981. So take ourselves out of today's technology and our era. So you go back to again with the 80s, a family with like there's not technology, there's not ways of communicating and finding each other in that way, not as up to date as we are in today's society. So like you get back into that like the simple minimalistic type of family lifestyle. You're like, okay, yeah, this is believable. Yeah, people used to like this. I agree. Like the first half, uh it was more like, oh, thriller, this guy's this girl's gonna kill me. Scary in that way. Not gonna lie, like once my anxiety let me get past the first 100 pages, then I was like, oh, it's cooking now. Like now we there was a switch, especially when we get into the astral projection part. I was like, oh, now it went from horror to psychological thriller. It got more like physically scary to mentally scary. And that's where the switch was in for me. We'll definitely talk about it. Yeah, I'm not really into, I mean, I do like psychological thrillers, not really into horror. I have seen I Know What You Did Last Summer so many times, being a big Sarah Michelle Gellar fan, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, definitely, the peak 90s era. Like, and that was an amazing cast of that movie. I didn't realize it was a book either. And I didn't also kudos to like Lois Duncan. Like I didn't know it was written by a female, so awesome. And I figured we do this one because this is probably one of her lesser known ones, and so I like to spotlight other books that people should also be aware of by good authors. And this one popped up. I heard about this one quite honestly through a podcast someone else was talking about it. I was like, oh, sounds fascinating. And then this was a good opportunity, I thought, for us to read it, especially being Halloween time, October, and here we are now talking about it. Yeah, so the main book really, it's about Laurie, a young 16, 17-year-old high schooler. It takes place like over the course of a year-ish. And it's really about she starts off knowing that there's this lingering presence in her house, in her area. She noticed things are kind of off kilter, like someone's been in my room, but I haven't been here. And she's bringing it up towards her families, and her friends are saying that, oh, hey, we saw you, but you weren't here, but we thought we saw at least you. So, what do you think of this build up of this side I should say side character, but like the secondary character of Leah, who ends up being Laurie's identical twin sister. But what do you think of the buildup of just like her presence and how she makes herself known to Laurie's family and friends?
Yeah, I mean, at that point in time, you don't really know what it is, right? Is it supernatural? Is it someone faking her identity, trying to ruin her life? It could be any number of things. And certainly the way that it was supposedly handled, Leah is there, just on the beach at a party that she's not at because she's sick, and then they're like, "Hey, you weren't sick, you lied." And what I also like about it, it's not just a one-way thing. It's like, okay, they found you supposedly lying, but the reason they found that was because you were making out with, one of the
With
best
Gordon.
friends. Yeah. So, it escalates the teenage emotions of it all, where there's no real right and wrong in any of it. Um, and yeah, I mean, the frustration on her part to not she doesn't know what is going on. B, she can't really explain it to people, and they don't believe her that, like, hey, that wasn't me. Yeah, yeah, whatever, you're a liar. And so I appreciate that, and I thought the setting, having to like bus them to the ferry, to the school and stuff like that every day, it's like it becomes unavoidable in terms of the human interactions. So I thought that was really well done, of the cattiness of it all, then the supernatural maybe elements.
Yeah, I have to admit, I enjoyed the mysterious kind of setup because there were so many friends and family who claimed they saw her, but yet couldn't like fully corroborate her stories and her situations. Like her father was like, "Oh, I thought I saw you," but he was too busy in his own writing world. Be like, "Yeah, everyone's kind of on autopilot. Like, yeah, I saw you, but I wasn't like thinking much of it at the time." So when they go back to it, they're like, "Oh, did that really happen? Did that not?" And that happens so many times with Laurie and her friends. They're like, "Oh, yeah, but we didn't, we just assumed it was you." And no one's like fully aware. And it gets Laurie even thinking, like, did I really do it? Was I dreaming? Was that I was just, going into my autopilot mode? So like there's a lot of uncertainty. And I was like, what can we believe? Because, that's the whole, like, there are statistics of people, witnesses to crimes, and when they have to go back and recount what they quote unquote saw, a lot of it's incorrect because
Yeah.
they're not fully paying attention to the details. So it's kind of like that same way. It's like, who's really telling the truth? Who really saw what they saw? And that part was confusing in a sense, but I liked it because it made everyone's like, question like, what's really happening? We
Yeah.
really don't know. So I thought that was an interesting setup. But it gets Laurie questioning everything. They're like, why? How can there be two of me? She goes and snooping a little bit for her family background, finds out she's adopted, and confronts her parents. And her parents actually tell the truth about this. So, what do you think of? Do you think this like whole adoption, twins, only adopting one child? I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen this kind of story, but did you think this kind of trope worked for this mystery?
Um, I mean, I liked it. The thing that so the mom had the same experience, and Meg also, the sister, had an experience where she saw Laurie's reflection, quote unquote, and it's there's that also trope of like kids kind of see more than adults,
Right.
yet we don't believe them, and so she saw Laurie floating, but of course it wasn't Laurie. And she felt the wickedness. Now, the mom explains the same thing. She held the young baby. They wanted to adopt both, essentially, but she held the one child, and she just felt like pure evil. Um, and that side of it, like, I liked that as a complication, but not that I needed it explained. There was just something about it where it didn't, I don't know, I'm trying to grapple with the idea, like, is she really evil? Or, as we learn Leah's back history, it kind of becomes not as a way of like justifying it, but it's understandable why she's essentially trying to do what she's trying to do.
Right.
So it's like it's an opposition of each other. Well, is she evil, or did life circumstances lead her to do it?
Right. And that's where you question the whole nature versus nature, nurture kind of like how you grew up versus what's biologically ingrained in you, And speaking as an adopted person, like we get those kind of questions, internal questions all the time. You're like, did I inherit this behavioral trait from my adoptive parents, my adoptive family? Or is this something that was like genetically ingrained in me? It's like we get those questions all the freaking time. So when now Laurie finds out the truth about her adoption, and now she's questioning like, huh. Like now she's now learning about her Native American history. She was part of the Navajo parts, Navajo, and their history. They have history with astral projection. Now we get into the supernatural type of element of this book. Quite honestly, did not expect this book to go that direction. I only read the book, the premise of like, oh, evil twin. I was like, yes, all for it. And then it went into, and this is where it switched with me. So I want to hear your thoughts of the introduction of astral projection. And do you think this was believable in the way that they set it up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they did a good job of really, I mean, whether or not like the studies they got is beside the point whether or not they're true in the story, right? And
Yep.
so I appreciated that it was very skill based and things like that. And even when Laurie is trying to learn how to do this, it takes her a bit. And so there's an internal logic to all of it that is consistent. So I can, I very much appreciated that. Um, it just kind of came to a head way too fast at the end. That's the only issue I have with it as a plot.
Yeah, you know what? I really didn't have that much of an issue with it because we see supernatural shows all the time. We see superhero characters all the time in that way. When they first like develop a quote unquote skill that's beyond the normal realm. And then, so like she learns about the astral projection. But like we do see like if it was translated into a film adaptation, this would be the montage version, like her just trying over and over and over again, trying to astral project, failing, getting snapped back to her body. We just see like 10 takes of her failing. But it gets to the point where she finally like starts, I wouldn't say master, but starts to get a hold of it. And now she's like learning more information about her friends, information about Leah. She finds out that she does have an identical twin sister named Leah in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because she finds out there is a time difference. Leah only shows up in the afternoon, which means she's busy in the morning. So what happens? There's got to be time difference there. So Laurie's, astral projection, finding herself, learning more about Laurie's background, or sorry, Leah's background, and the way that she grew up, bouncing around from foster home to foster home. But what did you think of Leah's mentality of trying, like, first of all, attempting to kill her future adoptive family sister, but like how that spirals Leah's background?
Yeah, I mean, um, it's I didn't have an issue with her in particular. More so like Laurie, like, don't you see the signs? Like, she won't tell you anything about her. She's snapping at you to like master astral projection. Why? Because she needs you to visit her, but won't tell you about her personal life. She doesn't let you
Mm-hmm.
have any friends. Um, which I guess if there's any side to it, it's like, Leah, if you're trying to like have this life, wouldn't you want all the friends? You know, like I
Right.
understand, Gordon, you would want to be with Gordon, the hot guy, you know, um, and stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting in that way. Yeah. If anything, I just have an issue with Laurie not catching on as quick. And also her writing is interesting because she always refers to mother and children as opposed to my brother,
Yeah.
sister, kids, or whatever. It's just the children, the children.
The children. Well, and also I think that was a nice distinction between the two because we see that Leah doesn't really have that actual natural inherent family connection, so she sees it as people, not as brother, not as there's a more intimacy level when you say sister, mother, father, so you can tell the difference. There's a disconnect between Leah and just like her personal people that she has, or lack thereof. And but I like that distinction because it shows, oh, because we see Laurie once she starts questioning everything, and like she goes on a teenage fit, like, you're my real family, you're not my brother and sister, yada yada. And then, like, as the story progresses, she realized, oh no, they are my family. I kind of need them. I do care about them. And so you see the importance of how family really does ground Laurie. And that's what Leah's been wanting this entire time. The way she goes about it, not the conventional way and not a very ethical way, I guess you can say. But you can understand Leah's motivation. It's really out of jealousy, knowing that that she could have had that life too. Like, had she been adopted, she could have had a successful family, a loving family, a supportive family in that way, and she didn't, and that's all she was trying to do.
Yes, no,
So
I mean,
did you sympathize with Leah?
I mean, it got a little bit difficult because once she does get into Laurie's body, that aside, in terms of a judgment, wouldn't she want to embrace the family and be like, hey, let's have game night? Hey, Meg, like, let's hug. What you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and feel that love. And maybe she would be awkward about it because she's never experienced it, but she's longed for it. And yet, like, she just does all the things not wrong, but it intentionally just like, you're a brat, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
You
It's like she
know?
finally got the family, and then she's treating them like dirt. Why?
Yeah. So it's like you've already ruined your life in that sense, which, okay, understandable. Here is your second shot, and you're about to go to juvie on day one,
Yeah.
you know? So that's where I had the issue with Leah.
Yeah, I did question that. I was like, Leah, I was like, I get it. You're jealous. You're also angry. You have anger issues. That's what therapy is for. But also, yeah, my question, because when we find out that Leah tried to kill her adoptive sister just so she could be the sole heir and the sole responsibility for the parents can take care of her. And now she was kind of doing the same thing with Laurie's family, like, all right, now that I have Laurie's body, get rid of the siblings, and then the parents will only care about me. Very, very selfish in that way.
And short-sighted too. I mean,
Yeah.
if two of your kids die, I'm pretty sure they would be grieving and maybe they would want to show love to Laurie, but they would just kind of be broken. So not a lot left to give,
Yeah, that was just her
unfortunately.
her ass backwards way of thinking. It's like, if I'm the only child, like, I'm the only one they can give attention to. And I deserve this attention because I never got attention my entire life. Yeah, it's a very twisted way of her logic. So like that, I do kind of sympathize. I was like, oh, I get how you got there, but also having a conscience, that's not the proper way to go about it. I do want to go into Laurie's friends. They did play a big pivotal role in the story, especially with Helen and Jeff. Speaking of Helen, because Helen, one of the many victims of Leah, actually lured her into the park, almost killed her via overnight, and like slipped on ice and almost died of hypothermia. And then we had Jeff trying to help Laurie with the astral projection information in the books and stuff. So what were your thoughts of Laurie's friends and helping her along her journey?
Yeah, I mean, Helen obviously was the most sort of beneficial and kind of was the catalyst of all of it, right? Her social circles, as
Mm-hmm.
well as her battle against Leah. And, it was her that kind of came up with the notion and saw Laurie for who she was, right? Her sort of background, introduced her to the, Native American sort of mythology or belief system. And yeah, it's a shame that the one person who knows the most, and obviously that becomes the big threat. So therefore, she's the first to go. Um, and in the end, like she kind of suffers a very tragic fate where she remembers none of it.
Mm-hmm.
The dad's like, "We'll just keep you updated. She's doing fine. Don't contact her. Let her live
Yeah.
her life." So yeah, I mean, like at least with Laurie and Jeff, like they found each other, and Jeff got a happy ending because the Laurie's parents are going to pay for his surgery. So hurrah! Whereas
Yeah.
Helen, she's like, all right, well, you're not dead, so good for you.
Yeah, and I think it also just shows how much Leah really inflicted Laurie's life because you think about it, Helen suffered the mental aspect of Leah's downfall, and then Jeff suffered the physical aspect. So you had physical and mental, and then Laurie was kind of like in between because unfortunately Laurie falls down the rocks side cliff there with Jeff too, gets stuck. But I feel like this was the moment where, like, you know how there's always that turning point with the character, like, okay, now I really got to get a handle on my skills or else like the plot's not going to move forward. This was like that moment where Laura's like, I gotta like learn my astral projection now or else we're gonna die. And then fortunately she was successful. Her brother saw her and found the two and rescued them in that way. But and then the whole final switching when Leah finally takes over Laurie's body for a while because Laurie, it gets to the point where Laurie kind of accepts her fate. Like, well, all right, if I can't have my body back, I'm just gonna hang around for as long as my conscience will let me and see what my friends and family are up to. Um, but then if you think about it, it's like really Laurie's family and friends save her.
Yeah.
Not Laurie. It was really her support system. So what were your thoughts of that?
Yeah, I mean, like, right. I mean, Helen, as we mentioned, played like a huge role, and it was her gift that allowed essentially the exorcism or whatever you want to call it of Leah.
Turquoise eagle necklace that helps ward off evil spirits.
Yeah, and so again, that was another sort of call towards, okay, Leah is just evil. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean that I understood it. Yeah, it just kind of it happened, and then like we wrapped things up very quickly of like, and then life kind of went on. Um,
Yep.
and then if anything, like the fact that Leah still exists there and stuff like that. I don't know. It's something that like much like the character of Laurie, sits with her and she started grappling with, what does it mean? Does she have any responsibility towards Leah? She knows where Leah is, um, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's not I like that it's not an easy solution,
Right.
and whatnot. It leaves you conflicted for sure.
Right. And she kind of has this like now inherent twin sibling obligation. Like, well, I should care about her. She is my sister. I feel bad that her body's stuck in a mental institution. Like the moment I read that, I was like, she has to be locked up. Because apparently even the adoptive father was like, no, you can't visit her. I was like, oh yeah, she's definitely institutionalized right now. Um, so like, and I thought the whole finding Leah that was a little too quick. But you have to move the story forward. But and I did like that. It was the family, it was the friend, because there was a point where Laurie was just like so adamant, like, no, I don't need anybody. And yet she needed everybody to help her. And just the irony of that. I don't know. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, absolutely. She essentially found her way back to her family. No longer does she need to do anything else. And even, the whole Leah aspect of it was resolved as far as her father, because he got the call from the other adoptive dad who updated her dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, let's not tell mom. We know what happened. Let's not tell mom. And that's it.
Right. And I think I kind of want to bring this up, the adult ignorance versus the youth innocence, and how we saw how it really played in in this book, especially with Laurie's parents being the adults. They can only think a certain way. They're like, oh, you're lying to us, you're snooping through our files and stuff. And they're just so they just don't believe Laurie and they think she's lying. But her younger siblings, we had Neil and Meg, who can that youthful innocence and naivety. They're like, oh no, we know who Laurie is. So like, what were your thoughts about like the adult logic versus the youth innocence where they were the ones who really could tell Laurie apart from like who she really was as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the parents certainly right, there was that baggage, and in particular the mom, right, where she felt very torn because she made the decision we're just going to get, even though they're twins, we're going to separate the twins because one is the evil incarnate. Don't know
Mm-hmm.
why. She just picked it up and it was like, no, thank you, not
The mother
today.
instincts kicked in, like, nope, nope, don't like this one.
Yeah, I I appreciate how it was handled because, it's like, well, why would you even try to adopt twins? Why couldn't you just find somebody that's like a single child or whatever, if that's all you could do? And so at least the backstory that was given was very believable.
Mm,
And you could tell like they cared about her and they did what's best for her and stuff like that. And so it is a sensitive subject. So they're going to miss the clues more easily, you know?
yeah. And then like you got to give it to the siblings who essentially saved her life multiple times. It was like Neil found her in the fallen within the rocks, and Meg was the one who distinguished Leah versus Lauren, the ghosty Leah. So like you got to give it to kids. Sometimes like people overlook kids, but I love when kids are smarter than the adults, or kids are like the ones who are like, oh no, they really know more than what's really meets the eye. And we saw that in this. And going back to this book was written in the 80s, so this was like pre-cell phone boom, pre-internet. If you had to look something up, you had to dial the operator, be like, yo, give me this state, give me this town, give me this person. Like you had to call someone to connect you to someone else instead of
Also, long
looking up
distance
and
phone
Googling.
calls.
It is.
Like, I mean, we
And then
take
I was
it
like,
so
all
granted.
right, do.
Like,
And I think my question is like, do you think this story would be believable if it was written in the 21st century?
yeah, I mean, you have to modernize it a little bit, but I think there's a,
Yeah.
way to go about it that makes it inherent for what it is, right? But I think it just adds to it, the whole thing. I mean, I love the part when the dad knows what Laurie did, and she's like, "How did you know?" And he's like, "I saw the phone bill. You made a long distance call. I saw the phone bill."
Yeah, I got to
You
follow
know,
up with that.
Whereas now, again, nowadays it's just different, right? Like, you can call anyone in the US, and we just take it for so granted. It's no different than calling local.
Yeah, just Google someone and like you see their whole life history in like 2 minutes.
Yeah. So,
Um,
yeah, it just would have been different in that way, but yeah, I do like, things that are kind of their time, and yeah, it feels in some sense like an 80s thriller, like a good thriller.
yeah,
So it was all there. I enjoyed it. And yeah, I mean, now, I mean, I'm not saying that astral projection exists necessarily, but like certainly like we as a society have done a lot more research into the spiritual realm and stuff like that. And so for it to kind of be at the start of it here, and Stanford and stuff like that. I appreciate that at least they attempted, to justify everything and made it work. So again, the internal logic of it
right.
for me really worked. And I mean, that's what kickstarted off was her distress and that need to project. And then once she knew that she could do it, she knew that feeling. So it's like reverse engineering it as opposed to starting from scratch, not knowing where you're going or what you're doing.
Right. And yeah, I like that because even Lois Duncan, there has been revised publications of this story since the original publication with updated technology. But Duncan herself said that she introduced cell phones in the revised version because many of the plots that she writes, she has the protagonist be in dangerous situations and who aren't able to reach the outside world, and that's like where the struggle comes in. So yeah, it's like technology can really do save people's lives, and the lack of it causes more jeopardy. And I think that's the thrill part. It's like, oh no, how do they get themselves out of this situation?
Or
They
you
have
flip
to
it on its head, like
rely on
Scream.
thinking.
Scream did a great version of it where it's got all this technology, and then all of a
All the phone
sudden,
calls.
well, the phone calls, but they lock themselves in the house, and it's like everything's smart technology, but then the person is able to control the smart technology and unlock the locks. And what are
Mhm.
you going to do? You know what I mean? So you can lean into it. So it all works. It just, you have to be clever in how you use it.
Yeah.
So
Um, Overall, I did like the story. Once, I got past I had to stop this a few times. My anxiety was like, don't like this. There's a girl staring at her with evil eyes. And then there was another part where she woke up and the girl was like literally looking over her, with an evil smile. I was like, no, 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 don't like that. I gotta go to bed right now. So I stopped it a few times. But like once we got to the astral projection, I was like, all right, okay, now I'm more susceptible to that because I don't know. I loved Supernatural. Charmed is one of my all-time favorite shows ever, and the character Prue, the oldest, actually one of her physical or one of her active abilities is astral projection. And I think that show actually does a great job of visualizing what it does to the corporeal body when the astral projection is doing something else. The body itself is kind of vulnerable. It's like anyone could kill the body because it's just there. And you and I were both into Avatar, Last Airbender, and Legend of Korra, and they do a lot of spiritual projection in that way, which is basically their own version of astral projection too, going into the spirit world. So like you can see a lot of modern shows and movies and stuff that like really do delve into their own version of astral projection and how it's evolved over the decades. And I definitely say check out those shows if you really want like a better understanding of astral projection and what it actually does. And so when we got that in the book, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm for this. I like this.
yeah,
Um,
when it comes to astral projection, it's like the Russian roulette musical chairs. That'd be like a fun, like, hey, there's gonna be four bodies. Go, who you got? When the music stops, go grab a body. There's
yeah.
six of you.
Also, I mean, hey, speaking of, Sarah Michelle Gellar, like there's an amazing scene, and I gotta now I'm going to show my age. Scooby Doo, the 2002 live version. There's a whole scene where their spirits are switching bodies like for 10 minutes. It's great. It's also like there are so many different versions of what you can consider out of body experience. So projection, people experiencing other bodies, but yet still aware of what's happening. Oh, it's amazing. I'm gonna go watch that movie after this. So this book actually got a lot of recognition as it should. It won the Massachusetts Children's Books Award and the California Young Reader Medal. It was named New York Times Notable Book of the Year and American Library Association Best Book for Young Adults in 1981. And the staff at University of Iowa selected the novel for the following year's book for young adults. So it was like really big in the young adult fiction story. And then, going into Lois Duncan, I've never read any of her books. Definitely have heard of her. And because, I know what you did last summer. But like she has an interesting history. She grew up she was born in Philadelphia, grew up in Sarasota, Florida, but as an adult, she moved to New Mexico. So that's where like the Western kind of side of the world and plays into her stories and stuff. But she started writing as a teenager, and she wrote for 17. She wrote a lot of like articles and stories and stuff. So that's kind of how she got into the teenage youth category and genre, because like she was that age and that's what her writing like was geared towards. So she kind of fell into that and kind of never like really got out of it. Yeah, I mean she wrote Hotel for Dogs and stuff and other famous series too, but most notably known for young adult fiction and scary like that. But she also, funny enough, it's not really funny actually, but me doing some research on her, she actually has a horror story in real life. Her real life daughter, Caitlin Arquette, who was 18 at the time, her youngest of five, was actually chased down and shot to death in Albuquerque, New Mexico, back in July of 1989. Caitlin had fallen in love, got in a relationship with the wrong man, and through him learned about all this criminal activity that were happening, and she was going to blow the whistle on him. Broke up with the boyfriend and was going to call them out, and actually got murdered for it. And but the problem was that the police were, it was a big cover up, and there was a lot of protection going on, and they gave the case back, and it was deemed unsolved, still a cold case. And they just kind of, they're like, no, it never fully got solved. But that was the catalyst for Lois writing the story "Who Killed My Daughter," which like really propels her forward in the horror mystery fiction aspect. But it was like really based on a real life tragic event. So like, she's seen a lot of horrors in her life too. Like, oh wow, that's scary. I can't imagine having that kind of life. That's unfortunate. But
Very
yeah,
much
I
so,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, and unfortunately she has passed away. But her work, outlives her. We're still reading it, and you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I'm curious to read her other books. So now maybe I'll read I Know What You Did Last Summer. I've seen that movie multiple times, and I'm not a horror fan whatsoever. So like, I know what happens. So anything else about this book, about Lois, that we may have missed or you'd like to bring up?
No, I mean, overall, it was an enjoyable book. Certainly, I could see if you're kind of in the teenage years, really being into this, and that goes for guys, women, it doesn't matter, right? I think, you know, especially like in middle school, I think this would be like one of those, like, okay, it's fun, but it's also scary, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's like a great age to read this book, So,
Right. Yeah, you do have to finish off that Leah does actually pass away. And I think there was a moment where Laurie's father is informing her, after him finding out about the long distance phone call. They're like, oh no, Leah did actually pass away. Her body is no longer there, therefore not posing the threat that she will ever taunt you
but her
again.
presence is there.
But her presence is there. So, but
So,
and I think there was a nice, because even if you read at the beginning of the book, the whole story, the main story, is basically a flashback, because Leah's reflecting on what happened a year ago, and now when we get to the end of the book, now Laurie's 18, she's off to college, and she's like, okay, I had this happen to me, but now I can move on with my life. And I think Lois does that. It's like, oh, it's always like a year. Like, look back a year ago. Like, I know what you did last summer. I know what you did. Like, Leah taunted you last year. So, that's a recurring thing with her writing, I guess. Overall, I actually did enjoy it. Once they got past the scary horror part and into the supernatural, I was like, yep, all right, got it. You got me.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about books that you read for fun, Phil.
So not that many, just one, but it is called Remember Love. It only came out this week, technically, but it's a book of poems. So uh, it's the full title is Remember Love, Words for Tender Times by Cleo Wade. And yeah, I don't read much poetry, but there's really great poems in here. And, I think part of it is, you know, uh, depending on what speaks to you at any moment, right? I think it's one of those you can pick up at any point, and just open to a page and get something out of it, or you can read from start to finish. So yeah, it's been fun.
Oh, nice. Very nice. I just picked up a book myself. This is actually an older book from the 90s. The Name of the Wind, by Patrick Rothfuss. This is actually book one in the King Chronicles series. I've actually been looking for this book for a while. I went to like 3, 4 different bookstores. No one had it. And then of course I went to Barnes and Nobles trying to find another book. And then this one was like right in front of my face. I was like, oh, of course. I should have just looked in the most obvious place. Occam's Razor, indeed. And so I finally picked it up. I was like, yeah, why not? And so I'm probably going to delve into that one soon. Speaking of books and stuff that we're going to dive into, Phil, let's talk about the two upcoming books you have.
Sure. So we've got The Legend of Bagger Vance, which is by Stephen Pressfield. Most people sort of know him from the War of Arts and things of that nature. But the reason he was even able to write all those books and become successful is because he also has a successful fiction side to him. Most notably, Legend of Bagger Vance, which is also a very great movie with Matt Damon, Will Smith. I believe Charlize Theron is in it. So I'm going to definitely watch that movie when we talk about this, but I'm a little bit into it. So far, pretty good. Then a fun one for Christmas, we have Skipping Christmas, which is by John Grisham. And Marissa thought that it was a murder mystery. Well, having read it, it is not. It's actually the basis for the movie Christmas with the Cranks, which I've not actually seen. Nor do I tend to because I hear it's bad. But the book itself, I've already read. This is partly why I don't have like other books that I've read because I'm just getting ahead on our actual reading list and now going to enjoy some. Anyway, Skipping Christmas, relatively short. And as the title implies, this couple tries to skip Christmas. Hilarity ensues. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to discuss. So we've got that for December.
Awesome. And I chose ours for the upcoming 2024 year. Wow. It's not that far away. Can you believe that? We're going to read Anxious People by Friedrich Bachmann. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. He's most notably known for A Man Called Ove. So I don't know. I like picking the lesser known stories of authors. So we're going to read that. It's actually a lighter, fun ensemble kind of story. Delves around the new year, but not quite about the new year. But it's about different types of personalities. They're thrown into a situation and craziness also ensues. So it's one of those where like, who's telling what's really true? Can we believe you or not? Craziness. So I thought that'd be a fun, witty, quirky one to start the year off.
Yeah. And then we get into February, The Earth of Mankind. So this is it's going to be a heavy book, but it's relatively, well, I guess it's like 340 pages, give or take. But it's from an Indonesian writer. So it'll be very interesting to kind of explore that part of the world. So yeah.
Yeah. So lots of upcoming fun books to read. And we're going to dive into those. Thank you always for tuning in, listening, reading along with us. Phil, what fun things can people follow you at?
Follow me at Phil Svitek, and I should have a new updated fun website with all the stuff, including our book club there for you, philsvitek.com. So it should be up and running real soon.
There you go. And you can follow me everywhere at Serafini TV. Follow us reading books, talking all about them, probably going into the movie adaptations as well. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you for our next book.